The global pandemic has put a strain on everyone's emotional and mental health. With anxiety and depression at an all-time high, we wanted to dive deeper and explain the chemistry behind emotions and mental health to gain a deeper understanding on how and why we express certain emotions and how our behavioral patterns can be affected. What is an emotion? An emotion is an adaptive response, part of the vital process of normal reasoning and decision-making. It is one of the highest levels of bioregulation for the human organism and has an enormous influence on the maintenance of our homeostatic balance and thus of our well-being. What causes emotions? Emotions are caused by chemical reactions in the brain via neurotransmitters. Neurotransmitters are chemical substances that transmit nerve impulses across a synapse to a postsynaptic element, such as a muscle, organ, or a gland. They can impact mood, emotions, and behavioral patterns. An imbalance of neurotransmitters can affect health, nutrition, external and internal emotional stimulus, and genetics. How are our emotions influenced by internal and external factors? In this presentation, we're going to talk about the different types of internal and external factors that can affect our emotions. One type of internal factor is a biochemical imbalance in our gut. Dysbiosis, also known as leaky gut, is a state in which there is an imbalance of microorganisms on or within our bodies. Food exposures to toxic metals, pesticides, and industrial pollutants increases oxidative stress in the body. Oxidative stress is also observed in 95% of mental disorder patients. Leaky gut is associated in patients with major depressive disorders and recent suicide attempts. Other causes of biochemical imbalances are abnormality in hemoglobin synthesis, genetics, environmental and emotional stress, and overuse of antibiotics. An external factor that can affect our emotional and behavioral being are chemosignals. Chemosignals are chemical signals in the human body gives off, often through sweat, through which people can interact. Chemosignals can unconsciously influence stress responses and behaviors in both humans and animals. Research shows that body odors of happiness, fear, and anger can be perceived by others and overall influence one's emotional and behavioral state.
What areas of the brain are involved? There have been many years of neuroimaging research to study different areas of the brain that are associated with different emotions. At the bottom, there's an image of glutamate, which is a chemical that is released by the amygdala due to fear. And different parts of the brain were determined primarily off of behavioral and physical reactions that occur in our body. When it came to studies of the brain, animals began as the first test subjects to determine the brain's activities during certain emotions. They used a variety of different animals such as bees, fruit flies, and rats, and a variety of the animals such as having their mothers, their young, alpha males, etc. For example, rats portrayed aggressive behavior, which was associated with an increased activity in the ventral forebrain. Scientists began with observing the physical responses of animals when expressing certain emotions and determined which parts of their brain were involved during these emotions. They then transferred this information over to study the human brain, and most of the hypotheses with the studies in the human brain began with the way animals would express their emotions. For example, because rats were aggressive in one part of their brain, they would transfer the same information over to test in a human brain. So what areas of the brain are involved when feeling these certain emotions? Most of these areas are located within the center of our brain, which are part of the limbic system. So beginning with fear, the amygdala correlates with fear due to the cardiovascular changes in our body, which are typically sensed by the amygdala and create this shock or freeze response, which are triggered by glutamate, as mentioned in the previous slide. And then the anterior insula is what is related to disgust, because this is the center of our brain that causes our bodily aversions in the rejection reflex of our body. And typically the chemicals that are associated with disgust are dopamine and serotonin. And moving to the orbital frontal cortex, this is what correlates with anger. This is mainly due to the aggressive part of our brain and is the center of physical anger responses such as abuse or destruction. And the chemicals that are associated with anger are epinephrine, also known as adrenaline to us. And then the anterior cingulate cortex is what is related to sadness. This is mainly due to the crying reflex, and this is correlated to low serotonin levels possibly, and a release of norepinephrine. So this image is just images of the brain that show the parts of the brain as mentioned in the previous slide. Located in the center, image B, the ACC is the anterior cingulate cortex, the OFC is the orbitofrontal cortex, and then looking to the C image on the right, the pink is the insula, and then the orange here at the bottom, that is the amygdala.
Chemical imbalance and mental disorders. A chemical imbalance is characterized by excessive or insufficient chemicals called neurotransmitters. Chemical imbalances are influenced by internal factors and cause anxiety and depression. Mental disorder is characterized by a wide range of conditions that affect one's mood, thinking, and behavior. The two common chemicals that are out of balance are serotonin and dopamine. Mood disorder. A mood disorder is a mental health problem that primarily affects a person's emotional state. The two most common mood disorders are depression and bipolar disorder. Depression is a mental health disorder characterized by persistently depressed mood or loss of interest in activities, causing significant impairment in daily life. Bipolar disorder is a mental health disorder characterized by episodes of mood swings ranging from depressive lows to manic highs. Eating disorders. Eating disorder is a behavioral condition characterized by severe and persistent disturbance in eating behaviors and associated distressing thoughts and emotions. Eating disorders can affect anyone at any age, but are most commonly diagnosed in adolescent girls and young women. The three types of eating disorders are anorexia nervosa, bulimia nervosa, and binge eating disorder.
Another emotion that chemistry plays a part in is anxiety. Anxiety is the body's psychological reaction to perceived threats. The amygdala tells the hypothalamus to initiate the fight or flight response. Anxiety is a feeling most people have experienced, whether it is the day before a big test or you're about to go on a date with a new person. The shaky hands, uneasy stomach, and sweaty palms is something many people can relate to. Studies have found new information about how anxiety impacts us. A chemical mapping of the brain study found that people with high anxiety demonstrated an increased concentration of chemicals in the orbital frontal cortex as compared to those exhibiting lower anxiety. The results indicate that the anxiety has patterns that are different depending on sex and age. The study found that women displayed higher levels of anxiety than men. The largest effect on anxiety was demonstrated by higher presence of N-acetyl-aspartate. So, that molecule that we see is the N-acetyl-aspartate that is found more in the orbital frontal cortex of women at a higher concentration. Although many people experience anxiety every once in a while, there are people that are diagnosed with anxiety disorders. An anxiety disorder is a mental health disorder characterized by feelings of worry, anxiety, or fear that are strong enough to interfere with one's daily activities. Stanford's studies on anxiety found information about the differences between people with normal states of anxiety and people with anxiety disorders. The orange brain regions in this image show the results that patients with generalized anxiety disorder have stronger connections to the amygdala. So, how can external factors influence feelings of anxiety? Well, anti-anxiety medications can help counteract feelings of anxiety. Benzodiazepines are just one kind of anti-anxiety medication. They enhance the action of the neurotransmitter gamma-aminobutyric acid, a chemical which inhibits anxiety by reducing nerve impulse transmission within the brain. These images show the molecule of benzodiazepine and gamma-aminobutyric acid, also shortened to GABA. So, the reaction between GABA and benzodiazepine starts in the left corner with glutamate decarboxylating and creating GABA. GABA then binds to the green circle, which is the GABA receptor, which opens up the inner channel, the black circle in the center. This inner channel creates a space for chloride ions to flow through. So in the top left corner, we see 3 different kinds of benzodiazepines: Aviton, Xanax, and phenobarbital. When a benzodiazepine enters the reaction, it also binds to the GABA receptors. This results in more GABA being produced, which causes the inner channel, the black circle in the center, to open up and let more chloride influx. This reaction results in calming anxiety. Thank you for listening to our presentation. We hope that you feel more informed about how chemistry influences our emotions and mental health.